Hey there, I'm here today working with this 4x6 clear stamp set from Crafty Jen Schow. This is still available in her shop. And I have a couple of ideas that I want to try with watercolor. So I'm going to use my new Mini Misty tool that I've done some videos about because I really am liking it a lot. And I'm going to start by just embossing this here on the watercolor paper. And I'm not sure how the watercolor paper is going to take embossing, but I guess we're going to find out. So I'm actually going to do the same thing on both of these cards, but I'm going to do kind of a reverse technique. The first thing that I noticed in working with this watercolor paper and embossing powder is that it wasn't leaving an impression until about 3 different times I think I had to apply Versamark. So usually you can tell that you've gotten a good coat of embossing powder or embossing ink on, and that it's ready to put powder on because it kind of looks like a wet watermark on the paper. But it took I think about 3 applications for each card to get to that point. And I really wanted to make sure that I had a nice application and was going to get, a good embossing impression, because this is watercolor paper. It's not cheap. And, it's this kind of technique takes a lot of time. So I wanted to make sure that I was going to get a good impression. So I think I did go over these with my anti-static bag too, which really makes a difference when you're embossing. And here, I'm so sorry that this is zoomed in. I zoom out in just a second. I took some Vicki Boutin watercolor brushes, and I'm working on a waffle flower mixed media mat here. And I just put a color in each square, and then I took a spray bottle of water and sprayed each color. So the Vicki Boutin watercolor brushes, and I'm assuming this is true of all watercolor brushes, are very concentrated. So I don't generally watercolor with the brushes themselves. I use them to put a little bit of pigment down on a surface, spritz it with water, spread it out, create more of it so that it's not so concentrated. And then I use a brush. I'm using a Vicki Boutin brush here to actually paint. So that's why having a mat like this is really helpful. The other great thing about this mat is that it's heat resistant. So I was able to emboss on it as well, and it can just take a lot of different stuff on its surface here. So I am by no means an expert. I don't even think I'm an amateur. I might even be the word, whatever would come before a beginner. That's where I am with watercoloring. So I'm just kind of figuring this out. The thing that's nice about watercoloring on an embossed image is that it creates nice boundaries, and you can basically just dip the brush into a section and it sort of spills and fills the whole area. So all you really have to do is kind of lightly move it around to fill the entire section in. Whereas with coloring, you have to kind of make sure that your brush is going in each nook and cranny. But with embossing and watercolor, you can basically just tap a section and the water sort of flows and fills the entire section. So I'm just adding random colors. I tried to do the leaves green, and the color or the flowers are kind of just multicolored. I mean, there's not really any order necessarily to what I'm doing. You can see that I'm just tapping some of the white spaces to fill in color and create some dimension, the illusion of dimension or depth with the colors. So the second idea that I had, rather than filling in the image, which is always kind of my first thought when I stamp an image, was to use the negative space. So to put color in everything except for the image itself. And again, I'm just kind of playing around. I don't really have any order to what I'm doing here, just kind of putting some pigment down, moving it around. Watercolor's tough because it's so fluid. And so you can't really control it. So for someone like me who likes a lot of order, and to kind of know how things are going to turn out and kind of have some sense of structure and formula, this watercolor is really tough. So I just kind of was just feeling it. Like, I feel like putting red here. I feel like putting yellow here. And it was just very kind of intuitive, whatever made sense to me at the moment. Something else I think that's hard about this kind of thing is that you can't really go back. You can't really undo things. So there's a lot of risk. So, I already embossed this, right? Like I've already invested a lot of time in this. So I want it to look good, right? And so there's some hesitance, I think, for me to do things because I'm worried they won't turn out well. So that's what happened here with this green. So I was like, do I want to add green? Is that going to look good? Like I can't really undo it. Once I add it, there it is. But I thought, you know what? Like, this is how I learn. I'm not going to know unless I try. So I just told myself, like, you have to do this. This is part of your process right now is learning. So I just went ahead and put some green in. The thing that I didn't like about this, that I wasn't quite sure how to correct it, was I didn't want there to be such a stark boundary on the outer edge of that green. I wanted it to sort of seamlessly flow together. And I had used a heat gun to dry the watercolor layer underneath it. So I think that's partly why that happened. I mean, watercoloring is for sure something that you have to practice and kind of, learn techniques and that kind of thing. So I've watched some tutorials. I need to watch more. I do really like it, but I'm learning. And so that boundary issue, was maybe my least favorite part of how this turned out. So what I ended up doing is after I go in and add all this teal, and I ended up going ahead and putting green and teal around the edges of the entire set of flowers here, is I took one of my little bottles of water and I just like misted the heck out of this thing. I sprayed a ton of water because I thought maybe it'll just really sort of reactivate some of those layers, and I'm misting it, and they'll kind of flow together in a softer way. And I did actually like the way that turned out. So here I'm taking a little circle from the flower set and creating a polka dot pattern around the stamped and colored in image there. And I decided that circle scale wise was just a little bit bigger than I thought looked good. So I found another set in my stash with a tiny dot, and I made a smaller polka dot pattern around this one. And I really like how that turned out. So, the size of dot that you use in a polka dot pattern can make a really big difference in how it looks, And I think it's always important to think about scale, when you're adding details like that. You wouldn't want to add a huge circle, right? I mean, I don't have any fancy terms for what that's called, but scale is the only thing I can think of. So then I was thinking, okay, I played around, I made these cards. What do I want to use them for? So I'm going to be documenting my January soon in Project Life. So I thought I should do some card about January. So I played around with vellum. It wasn't popping against the background quite enough. So I found a little sheet of holographic paper in my stash and cut it and stamped January from a Studio Calico stamp this month. And then I cropped these down to 3x4 because I wanted them to be 3x4 cards. And I did a lot of moving and playing around to decide the right orientation, and decided to make the flowers go vertically, that I liked that the best. And I just used some word strips here. Just kind of went through my stash and tried to pick something that felt January themed. Yeah, and I like how these turned out. I'm excited to put them in my Project Life this month and pair them with photos. I like how you get two different looks from two different techniques here. So be sure to check out Crafty Jen Schow's website. I know the quantities on this set are low, so grab it if you're interested, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments.